Oh, hello again. So you made it back for round 2. That's great, but if you didn't see round 1 on this, there was a link down below to the first video in this series, and I think it behooves you to watch that first, because some really famous people would be skipped over if you didn't do so. Go do that. I'll be right back. Hey everyone, I'm Nick in the States, and this is the top 10 of the top 20 iconic guitarist and guitar pairings. I put in a whole lot of effort munching this list, bugging my friends, trying to create this rating scale to create a list of the top 20, along with 30 more honorable mentions, which really gives you 50 if you're doing math at home, which, come on, I don't want to strain you today, so we're going to try and go easy on this. To recap the rules and how I did this, I actually rated each guitar and guitarist pairing based upon, first, the guitarist's guitar monogamy. Did he cheat on this guitar with a lot of other guitars? Or was that his main squeeze? Yeah, everyone has a backup, things like that, but you know what I mean. Second, when you see this guitar, do you immediately think of the artist? The tiebreaker also being, is this guitar probably being cloned and sold on Chinese sites like Alibaba or AliExpress? That kind of tells you that it's famous enough to be on that portion of the list. Third, how relevant is this person, this artist, who has this famous guitar? There are people, for example, in my hometown of East Falmouth, Massachusetts, there's a guy named Donnie Wilson. And if you come from that town and have gone out to watch music, you know Donnie is always playing his American Vintage Reissue 57 Tobacco Burst Stratocaster. That's awesome! But unfortunately for Donnie, because you're all missing out, outside of East Falmouth, Massachusetts, or East Cape Cod on Massachusetts, nobody's seen Donnie. And so apply that on the larger scale here. You may be famous in the prog rock community, blues, death metal, but if you don't have universal appeal, you're gonna get dinged on. That's the score. Let's get to it. But before we get to number 10, we're gonna start with another group of honorable mentions. And this is a group that's really all knocked because they all play the same type of guitar, and those guitars are equally as famous as the people who play them. And these would be 58, 59, 60-ish people that are famous for playing a Les Paul standard. The list is Duane Allman, Joe Perry, Gary Moore, and Bill Gibbons. Because while those people do own very famous examples of those, I think the Greenie Moore might be the most famous. But Joe Perry's guitar, which Joe Perry's one was great because he had it. He fell into drug addiction. Careful with the drugs, kids. Sold it. Eric Johnson bought it. Played it for a while. Then tried to sell it back to Joe, and Joe was still broke from drugs. And so he eventually sold it to Slash, who held on to it for a long time, and Joe Perry got money again. Spoiler alert, Aerosmith bounced back. Made a lot of money. Had even bigger hits. Tried to buy it back, never could buy it back from him until it was Joe Perry's something-th birthday, and Slash gave it to him as a present. Because Slash is a really good dude, and Joe Perry's actually Slash's idol, so you get why. But that's the reason why. This entire group, going from top to bottom there, Duane Allman, same deal, died young, gets kind of penalized for that. Famous for his Les Paul, but because he died a long time ago, he's still revered in the guitar community, but his cultural impact outside of Macon, Georgia, and people who really are huge into guitars is diminished a little bit. And you hold up that Les Paul, and it could be a lot of other people's Les Paul. Someone will say, oh, Joe Bonamassa. That's the kind of thing. That's the challenge there with Brother Duane. Joe Perry, same deal. It's a dark tobacco burst 59 Les Paul. It's probably one of the most famous dark tobacco burst 59 Les Paul, but fortunately doesn't really apply there. Plus, Joe played a lot of other guitars over his life and did a bunch of different endorsements. And today when you go and see him, he's probably playing a Les Paul for a while and then a bunch of strange custom stuff. And Strats and whatever. He enjoys the whole full run of guitars. Gary Moore just isn't relevant today. Sorry, your playing's beautiful. Amazing player, really great stuff. The guitar is iconic because it's gone through 3 famous persons' hands. I think Bernie Marsden has it now. Originally it was Peter Green's guitar of Fleetwood Mac fame, among other things. And then Gary Moore had it in the middle, and it's a beautiful color, shape, everything. But there's nothing that super jumps out about it. except for the fact that it's kind of like a lemon-ish Les Paul. Reverend Billy Gibbons. This one hurts. Because Miss Pearly Gates, he is so identified with having Miss Pearly Gates, which is this magical 59 Les Paul that's just gorgeous, and who's blessed all of ZZ Top's albums. So I think a lot of people in the guitar world see a perfect Cherry Sunburst Les Paul from 59 or reissue and think Billy Gibbons and the legendary Pearly Gates. But if you've seen ZZ Top play, or even Billy Gibbons on his solo tours, he plays everything from furry guitars to double neck, triple neck guitars to Strats and Tellys and whatever. Everything. Because the man loves his gear. And so he gets knocked on that. Still pretty relevant, but unfortunately those are the things that drop him down here, even though his guitar is so incredibly famous. But we're getting in rare air here, and this is why he couldn't make the top 20. Now, on to number 10. If you're gonna play a guitar that looks like almost everybody else's version of that guitar, you could try two things to make it look more like yours. You could go the Rory Gallagher route, who didn't make any of these lists, sorry Rory, and just wear the crap out of it, which makes it iconic on its own. Or you could put your initials in giant sparkly letters on it, and maybe that'll do it for you. Or you do both, and that's what Stevie Ray Vaughan did. With his number one is the famous, most iconic SRV Strat. And that guitar you look at, I mean, come on, that's Stevie Ray Vaughan, exactly as it's set up in the picture. When you see it, that's it. Some people forget that he also has Lenny, which was the brown Strat that his wife gave him. And he has a few other ones, and he named all of them, which is nice. I think there are 5 or 6 ones that all got named Lemon and a few other ones. So he gets knocked a little bit on the monogamy, but when you get to the iconicness of that guitar, that's SRV on it. That's Stevie Ray Vaughan's guitar. You know it. He nails it there. He does get knocked though because he died youngish, too young anyway. Once again, he was plane crash. I think he sobered himself up. He didn't get bit by drugs and alcohol. Yeah, I think it was helicopter crash that got him, or plane. Next up, also with the 26, is a guy that's still keeping rock alive. He's also been lucky enough that many people, when they're in two iconic bands, they will change their guitar from one to the next. When Slash played in Guns N' Roses, he played his Les Paul most of the time. When he was in Velvet Revolver, he still played his Les Paul a lot, but he played a Mockingbird quite a bit too because it needed a trem and it was slightly different and you knew that you were in a different state. Well, this guy didn't have to worry about that because in his first band, he played drums. So in his second major famous band, he could play a Trini Lopez guitar, which he would later come out in a Pale and Blue version, and it would be known as the DG335. That man is Dave Grohl of the Foo Fighters fame. And this guitar is, when you see it, everybody knows it's Dave Grohl guitar. He's played other guitars. He's played some Firebirds and Explorers over the years, but really this has been his main go-to axe, a version of the Trini Lopez, which was kind of one of those rarish guitars from the early 60s. The irony is you'd say, oh, but he's famous for playing a Trini, so Trini should be on the list. Trini Lopez had 2 fully different shaped Gibson models. He had 2 separate guitars, so he was, even by Gibson's admission, not monogamous enough for this list. But there you go. Dave's really still relevant. They're still doing a whole lot of stuff, and that's why he ends up right here. And probably the of the top 2 people that are still kind of the modern guitar era, where some of the other guys are slightly more vintage, to preview where things go. But Dave Grohl, you're right here. Next, this is a guy from Australia who plays an SG that's red through a Marshall for a long time with his brother in the band, and they ripped through a whole lot of things. It's our friend Angus Young in his schoolboy outfit rocking out with AC/DC. And there are still generations when you show him an SG and it's, oh, that's an AC/DC guitar. That's Angus Young's guitar. He's really put that guitar, or kept that guitar on the map, and been its, one of the biggest stalwart players of it. I don't think I've ever seen him play myself another guitar out there. And, AC/DC, while not what they maybe once were, still packs houses, still super relevant. And that put Angus right here on the list. Beating Angus at one step up at number 7 with an identical score is a guy that proved that you can play a Les Paul standard flame top, cherry sunburst and some degree of faded outness. And he knew that he would just be lumped in with everybody else, so he took off the bridge pickup cover. Actually, he probably did that because he thought it sounded better and made it a little bit more live and growly. But he took that pickup cover off, and therefore, you now know a Jimmy Page Les Paul or a Jimmy Page wannabe guy if it's missing the bridge pickup cover. And that's from Jimmy Page's #1 Les Paul, which is a 59 Les Paul standard. He has another 59 or 60, which is #2. Also removed that one slightly. I think one was a little bit more brown in the sunburst versus cherry, but still an iconic, famous guitar that you can immediately pick out and know it's Jimmy Page's. Now Jimmy's here are not higher up on the list because that's such an iconic guitar. He's still quite relevant because he also played a cool Dragon Telecaster that Fender just reissued. He played a 3-pickup with Bigsby Les Paul Black Beauty Custom. And he also played an EDS 1275 double neck. That's a mouthful. 2-neck guitar so he could play Stairway to Heaven on the stage. And each one of these are really very iconic guitars themselves. So that puts Jimmy right here. Next, with an identical score of 26, is a rock pioneer. As already mentioned earlier when I pulled up my 335, and that's Chuck Berry. Chuck played 345s, 355s, almost always cherry, and almost always without a smile on his face, except when he was playing, because he was a crotchety gentleman, especially in his later years. But he made those guitars really famous and continued to play them forever. And I think that the impact that he's had on other players, and how much he's revered, and just when you see that guitar, it's Chuck Berry. Whether you're seeing Michael J. Fox play it in Back to the Future or any other time you see a guitar like that, they're doing it because they want to be Chuck. And that's why Keith Richards plays it. Plays one, owns one, has played a lot of things. He wanted to be Chuck. That's really it. He wanted to be Chuck. Before we get to the top 5, I have a few more honorable mentions to list out here. These are all super talented people that for one reason or another just couldn't quite make it in, or I somehow could juggle them in. Zakk Wylde, Bullseye Les Paul Custom. Awesome. Not super famous anymore. Plays a lot of his own guitars these days. That's why he's not there. Brian Setzer, a Gretsch 6120, whether it's his original ones or his hot rodded version. Pretty impressive, pretty tied to him. When you see it, you probably think Brian Setzer, but when was the last time you thought of Brian Setzer? If you're not a rockabilly guy, he's not super culturally relevant. Around Christmas time, maybe. Some of his Christmas stuff is amazing, but unfortunately, it is what it is. Jerry Garcia. What? Oh, I said Jerry Garcia. This one is really just because it's iconic guitar pairing, not brand. His Alembic or Alembic style, I know it was the luthier at Alembic that built him for him, whether it's Tiger or Rosebud or Wolf or some of the other guitars he played, or the Harley Davidson Strat that he had. I think there was enough different guitars in there that he doesn't get the Great Guitar Monogamy Award. But when you see one of those guitars, you know it's Jerry's. It's just he had a few, and that's sort of why he missed the overall list just barely. Steve Vai. It's hard. He has a Monkey Grip Gem 777, which is awesome. If you're a guitarist and you see it, you know it's Steve Vai's. He's played that for a long time, since it was an RG that didn't have a monkey grip, really, right? But he's also not super culturally relevant, and I think that's the challenge for some guy like Steve. So, Eddie Van Halen. Also, honorable mention, not making the top 20. And the reason for this is he played a lot of different iconic guitars. If you can do the most iconic paint scheme, he'd have it, right? It really jumps out. He almost makes it. Eddie is himself super, still relevant and iconic, and he plays some great stuff now. But I think you would use his, the hot rodded Super Strat from the beginning that had a PAF in it originally, and then later had, I think, a DiMarzio in it. But I just don't think he played so many other things, and he had so many other relationships with Ernie Ball Music Man, then PV, and then Fender, of making his own ones after his garage built specials, that I think it's kind of, it is what it is right there. That's why I didn't make it. And John Mayer. It's a Sunburst Strat. That's it. With wear. It's not the most iconic guitar. And John Mayer's played a lot of different things, especially now that he's with PRS with a Silver Sky. So I'm not saying John's history with women has anything to do with his guitar monogamy, but it doesn't quite make the list. That one hurts so too. It feels like he should be in the top 20, right? Especially because he's probably the most relevant modern guitarist right now, especially solo acts. But he didn't. So sorry. On to the top 5. So at number 5 on the list is a guy who's so famous he's on millions of guitars. His name, of course, is Les Paul. And how he ends up only at 5 on a list where he has a guitar so famous that everybody knows it's a Les Paul is because they don't know it's Les Paul's Les Paul. It's somebody else's. There's so many famous Les Paul players more famous today than Les Paul himself. I think the cultural relevance knocks him down a peg, as does the fact that while I know it was the perfect tool for what he was trying to do, Les played probably the ugliest Les Paul, the signature recording that he did in the 70s. And so I think I mentally take him down a peg for that. It's a tool. He's using the right thing. It's just not the prettiest piece that he's known for. Next at number 4 is B.B. King. And when I show you Lucille, a guitar who's just known, like Lenny for SRV or whatnot, Lucille. You know, it's a black ES355 with Lucille scrawled across the headstock and no F-holes. That's the guitar. And he played that forever. And before that, the guitars he played were ES355s, 345s, maybe even a 335 in there. And then way back in the day, he played some big boy semi-hollow or hollow-bodied Gibsons. But he's been remarkably consistent forever. And the guitar itself has a great mythology. BB has a wonderful story of the history of Lucille and the name and how he's always called him Lucille ever since. And so I think for that, he ends up here. He may not be the most relevant guy, but I still think a lot of people know who BB is and how he played and just such a signature guitar player that he ends up at this point on the list. At number 3 is Mr. Jimi Hendrix. Yeah. Jimmy played a lot of guitars. He had a really cool Flying V. He had a really cool hand-painted Monterey Jazz Fest Strat. He had his white guitar with the reverse headstock, which he's definitely more famous for, among others, right? He played a lot of different guitars in his relatively short life, and I think he gets knocked slightly here on this list and doesn't go higher because of that, and because he wasn't the most monogamous guitar player with guitars. I don't know what he was in the rest of the stuff. Didn't seem very monogamous in other stuff either, if you talk to anybody. Just saying, Jimmy. But his white Strat is just signature with a reverse headstock and the pickup going in the wrong direction and upside down and whatever. This is a guitar that when you see a lefty white Strat strung up righty or a righty white Strat strung up lefty, you think Jimi Hendrix. It's just such a famous thing even today, even 45 years since he passed away. He's still so iconic, and that's why he ends up at this spot on the list. Next at number 2, I gotta be honest with you here, I kind of originally thought to do this list so that this person would be number 1 because I thought the story was so worth being the number 1 most iconic guitar and guitarist combo. And then I made the rating system and he kept always ending up at number 2, and I had to be honest about how that sets up. But I mean, the man built the guitar with his pop in the shed and played it for 40-something years. And it's just the only guitar he's really played electric. He's played a backup or 2 over the years and 1 or 2 other appearances with other guitars, or eras or sometimes, but this is still his oh-so-special, Red Special. And that man is Brian May. And Brian May is actually more relevant than normal because of movies lately and still playing with the remnants of with Queen and Adam Lambert. And the guitar is with him everywhere he's gone. And the Red Special really is Brian May, and that's why they're here at number 2. Now, before I get to number 1, I have the last honorable mention. The last guy. So if your people aren't on this list anywhere, I forgot about him, I missed him, or I didn't care about him. Sorry. But this guy is... I avoided acoustic guitars in this because they're acoustic guitars and it's not really my big interest. But when your acoustic guitar is named and everybody knows it and you've been seen everywhere playing it and the only thing holding it together is spit, grease, and bong water, well, Trigger's a real special beast, and Willie Nelson is a real special guy. And I think, on many lists, to not have Willie Nelson anywhere mentioned in this entire thing, that guitar is barely held together, big hole in it, it's incredible, but he's played it forever, and it's on everything. And it's as much a part of Willie Nelson as the ponytail and the marijuana smoke. So that's your last honorable mention, which brings us to number 1. And if you've been keeping track and checking off your little bingo card, you probably have only a few squares left, and some of those I forgot, or missed, or didn't care about, and one of those is Slash. Now, I hoped Slash wouldn't make number 1, but here's the deal. Yes, he played knockoff Les Pauls. No, don't say So, but true. Actually, the first 2 or 3 of his Les Pauls weren't real Les Pauls. They were from a couple different builders out there. But they were very accurate, more accurate than Gibson was making at the time Les Paul copies of a 59 Les Paul. And so that's what he's known for. But he was smart enough to have ones that had really washed out bursts and zebra pickups. And when you see a lemon burst-ish Les Paul with zebra pickups, you think Slash. Or when you see his one that has the giant Slash inlay and the top hat and smoking cigarettes and all the other stuff on the headstock, you also think Slash because it's Slash on it. But we'll stick to the classic one. But I think he's got a very unique combination of guitar monogamy where he's played Mockingbirds, he's played double necks, he's played a few things over the years, but that Les Paul in every concert has been played for some significant period of it. That, if not particular Les Paul, that format Les Paul. And when you see it, if you go on AliExpress, the most common selling copy guitar on there is the Slash, followed quickly, I think, by Jimmy Page and a bunch of others. And he still remained remarkably alive, I think it's the most part, and relevant even today. And I think that's why he ends up at number 1 here. It's kind of the cliched choice. It's kind of course, it's Slash. Come on, man. But alas, it is. So we've done it. We've gone from 20 to 1 with 30 honorable mentions thrown in there. I hope this was interesting to you. I hope this was fun. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you subscribe, click the bell, like, comment, do all that jazz. It helps. It's fun. And as always, I've been Nick in the States. Yes, indeed, I have issues, but it's been a lot of fun, again, sharing with you. Take care.
Check out some of these videos, and tell me when you click the red button, I'm going to ask you to go to music class. You know, yeah, I'm going to ask you to go to Ninja class.
Ninja class!